I hadn't even taken off my coat. My suitcase was still in the trunk of the cab when the email came through. Please stop by my office when you're back on site. No subject line, no thank you, no acknowledgement. I had just wrapped a 36-hour sprint. Hong Kong, Munich, Chicago. My mission? Lock in the $15 billion financing package that Stratwell Global had been courting for over 5 years. And I did it. 10 years of secured capital across 3 continents. Paperwork signed, commitments locked. But Marshall Green didn't ask how it went. He didn't ask if I'd slept. Just motioned to the chair across from him. His eyes never left the folder on the desk. "Carla," he said, voice level, flat. "Effective immediately, we're adjusting your role and compensation structure." I stared at him. "Come again?" I asked. "You'll be reassigned to a streamlined support role. Operations liaison under the growth division." I built the growth division. From scratch. "And your pay will reflect the new scope. Roughly a 60% adjustment." My skin went cold. My breath caught in my throat before I could stop it. But I didn't speak. On his desk were 2 printed documents. One labeled Revised Compensation Terms. The other titled Reassignment Notice. No room for edits. Just 2 boxes for signatures. He pushed a pen toward me without making eye contact. "Your new reporting manager will be James. I believe you met him last Thursday." James Green, his son, 28, new MBA, fresh suit. The one who asked me if we had a lost and found on his first day because he couldn't find his tablet. I paused, nodded once, picked up the papers, turned around. I don't remember the walk to the elevator. Just the sound of someone laughing down the hallway and the stale scent of burnt coffee. I remember thinking, they didn't punish me for failing. They punished me for succeeding in a way they couldn't control. And something inside me shifted. Not broken, just realigned, focused, and sharper than ever. I don't even remember walking out. But I do remember the silence in the hallway as I passed the boardroom. I remember the hum of the exit signs and the smell of stale coffee drifting from the kitchen. And I remember one thought, sharp and certain, slicing through the haze. They didn't demote me because I failed. They demoted me because I succeeded without asking permission. That was the moment something shifted, and something new took root. They didn't give me time to adjust. The very next morning, I arrived at 7:30 a.m. sharp. Just like always. My old key card still opened the front door. But everything else had changed. My name had vanished from the frosted glass panel outside the 3rd-floor office suite. The desk I had called mine for almost a decade. Empty. Sanitized. Replaced. A fresh nameplate read, James Green, VP, Growth Operations. I didn't ask questions. I didn't make a scene. An intern, one I didn't recognize, appeared without a word and gestured toward a corner desk. My new workspace was wedged between the back hallway and the office vending machine. No window, no divider. Just a dusty chair and the steady thrum of a printer that jammed every few hours. There was no welcome email, no memo. Not even a note of acknowledgement for 17 years of service. Just silence, and eyes that refused to meet mine. That afternoon, a calendar invite popped up. Internal strategy session. 2 p.m., conference room B. No context, no attachments. Still, I went. Habit runs deep. When I stepped into the room, it was like someone had pulled the air out. James was at the front, fumbling with the projector remote. My former team sat scattered around the table, heads bowed, avoiding my eyes. "Carla," James said, clearing his throat. "Mind grabbing a fresh pot of coffee for the group?" For a second, I thought it was a joke, but no one laughed. No one objected, not a single glance in my direction. I nodded once, walked out. My palms trembled as I reached for the pot in the break room. Not from anger, not yet. from something quieter and deeper. It wasn't anger, it was something worse, something raw. Shame, sharp and low, prickled at the back of my throat. A slow, quiet burn settled in my chest, like I'd been erased, and left to serve the people who once sat across from me, taking notes. Back in the conference room, James was mid-presentation. Our new strategic roadmap, he said, straightening his collar, was developed in collaboration with senior leadership. He clicked to the next slide. I froze. It was my deck, my design, my strategy. Every bullet, every diagram. Even the pale blue headers I used to differentiate verticals. Word for word, except for one thing. My name was gone. Not plagiarism, not technically. I had drafted it on a company server in a shared drive, but it felt like watching someone read your diary to a room full of strangers who pretended they'd never heard your voice. The room nodded along like James had dreamed it up over breakfast. I placed the coffee pot on the side table and sat in the back. No one offered me a seat. No one said, "Thank you." That's when the truth hit me. They hadn't just replaced me. They wanted me to serve the quieter version of myself, the one they could mold. The following week, I began eating lunch alone. No one mentioned it. But the message was clear. I had become untouchable, radioactive. People who once sought my opinion now avoided eye contact. Elevators went quiet when I stepped inside. Conversations paused like someone had hit mute. The building buzzed with movement, but around me it was silent. So I took my lunch to the back stairwell. It was the only place still mine. The air was stale. Pipes clanked softly overhead. I climbed slowly, sipping bitter coffee from the same paper cup I hadn't yet thrown away. That's when I noticed it. The elevator display lit up for the 10th floor, but didn't open. No chime, no movement. Just quiet. When I reached the landing between floors 9 and 10, I saw it. A faded, "For Lease" sign, taped behind dusty glass. The plaque beside it simply read, "Level 10, immediate occupancy." And I stopped, and I stared. If you want to discover how this story unfolds and learn the next steps I took to reclaim my power, make sure to subscribe. Because the journey is far from over, and you won't want to miss what's coming next. I smiled. Not a big smile. More like one that stayed hidden behind my lips. Sharp, controlled, but unmistakably real. The next day, I returned to the same stairwell. This time, I brought a sandwich and a question. Exactly at 12:15 p.m., I walked through the main lobby without swiping my employee badge. Instead, I approached the front desk and asked to speak with the building manager. I introduced myself as a representative helping a small advisory firm scout for quiet, private office space. The receptionist simply nodded. A few minutes later, a man appeared. Mid-50s, worn blazer, clipboard in hand. "I'm Thomas Renner," he said. "Facilities director for the building." "So you're looking on behalf of a client?" he asked. "Yes," I replied smoothly. "A boutique advisory group seeking long-term stability, privacy, and room to grow." He raised an eyebrow, then nodded. "That's exactly what we need right now. Since the pandemic, we've had to rethink how we lease." He leaned in a little, voice dropping. "There's been talk of the ownership group quietly offloading part of the property. Nothing public yet, but they're feeling the squeeze. Not enough long-term tenants. If your client is serious," he added, "they might consider selling partial equity in exchange for guaranteed lease commitments." I kept my face neutral, but inside, my heart jumped. Office space, control, leverage, all hiding just one floor above the people who had demoted me. "I'll pass that along," I said with a slight nod. "Thanks for your time," Thomas replied. As I left the lobby, I glanced back at the brass directory. Stratwell Global. Floors 3 through 6. Available. Floor 7. I didn't have a plan yet, but I had direction. And for the first time in weeks, I had space. If humiliation was my first lesson, clarity was the second. I stopped reacting. I started writing. The day after meeting Thomas, I went home and opened a blank legal pad. Not a Google Doc, not a spreadsheet, just ink on paper. Quiet, purposeful. I listed every asset I owned, every ally I trusted, every line of leverage I could pull. At the top of the page, I wrote, Northwood and Ash Consulting, a confidential formation. The name meant nothing to anyone. No flash, no ties to my past work. But it carried meaning for me. Northwood, for the direction I was headed. Ash, for everything I'd burned through to get here. I incorporated the company as a limited partnership, using a legal shell I'd set up years ago for side consulting. A structure so subtle, no one bothers tracing it unless they're digging deep. I used my middle name for the registration and listed the mailing address of my old college mentor's law office as the contact. He owed me a favor, one I planned to collect. Within 72 hours, Northwood and Ash Consulting had a tax ID, a bank account, and a generic logo, just professional enough to blend in. No announcements, no public filings tying it back to me. A clean slate, quiet and surgical. By the end of that week, I reached out to Thomas again. I asked for a tour of Floor 7, not as Carla Reynolds, demoted operations liaison, but as C. Norwood, managing partner of a new financial advisory firm seeking discretion and room to grow. Thomas didn't blink. The space was exactly as I remembered. Unfinished. Wide open. Silent. Perfect. We signed the lease that afternoon. I paid 6 months up front. Quietly, using the year-end bonus Stratwell had delayed after my Munich trip. Money I was never going to see anyway. Better to put it to use before they forgot. The next morning, I sent a simple letter of interest to the ownership group through my legal proxy. Northwood and Ash Consulting expressed potential interest in acquiring partial ownership in the building, contingent on discretion and a long-term lease. No public disclosures, no signatures, no pressure, just a polite nudge. Easy to ignore, until it wasn't. Back at Stratwell, no one suspected a thing. I still showed up, still made the coffee, still sat by the printer. But now I had keys. I had documents. I had time. And for the first time in my career, I was building something real, something that couldn't be reassigned or renamed. If I was going to build it, I wouldn't do it alone. But asking for help, especially from people still inside the company that had gutted me, felt like trying to hug someone while your hands were still bleeding. I started with Michelle. She was one of the sharpest analysts I'd ever worked with. Quiet, methodical, brilliant with predictive models. We'd spent 5 years troubleshooting late-night simulations together, back when our work still meant something. I messaged her on Signal. Not email, not text, just one line. If I said there's a different way, would you want to hear it? Off the record? She didn't reply right away. When she did, it was 3 words. Where and when. We met that Sunday in the back corner of a coffee shop 2 blocks from the office. She wore sunglasses and a hoodie. Her first words weren't friendly. They'll blacklist me if they find out. I know, I said quietly. But they already made it clear loyalty doesn't mean anything to them. She stirred her coffee. What do you have? A floor, a plan, and silence. Next came Lewis. He'd been managing projects for the ops team, the kind James now claimed to restructure without knowing how they worked. Lewis had integrity, but also 2 kids in private school. I expected him to hesitate. He did. If I leave now, I might never get back in, he told me. They own the contracts, I said. But we own the relationships. He looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. The hardest was Diana. She still handled client liaison for the $15 billion account. Smart, composed, always 2 steps ahead. The kind of person who never panics, even under pressure. She listened silently, arms folded, expression unreadable. Do you know what they asked me in our last meeting? She said finally. What? She leaned in slightly, voice low. Is Carla still involved? That cracked something open. It wasn't about titles or desks or salaries. It was about trust. I'm in, Diana said, on one condition. Name it. We never become what they are. I smiled, not out of victory, but from something I hadn't felt in weeks. Hope, small, quiet, and dangerously alive. 3 people, 1 empty floor, just enough belief to begin. Hope is fragile. It only matters if you act before it fades. We didn't wait. Within 48 hours, we turned the 7th floor into a war room. No branding, no fancy furniture, just a whiteboard, 4 laptops, and a silent agreement. We weren't here to rebuild resumes. We were here to counter-strike. No salary yet. No funding lined up. Just time, grit, and coffee that tasted like determination. I broke the strategy into phases. First, we need to reverse engineer what Stratwell Global is doing wrong, I said, circling a section of the whiteboard. Michelle, I need predictive modeling based on how they might restructure their capital flow. Assume they're overpromising short-term ROI just to keep the board happy. She nodded, already pulling up her tools. Diana, review the original commitments in the funding framework. What language can be weaponized if they're off track? On it, she said, flipping through files. Lewis, any internal clues on where their blind spots might be? He reached into his bag and pulled out a wrinkled stack of papers. I wasn't going to mention this, he said, but someone left these in the copier room last week. Looks like they assumed no one would notice. He laid them out on the table. Projected resource allocations, misaligned rollout deadlines, and a bolded note, expedite client engagement by trimming pilot oversight. I stared at it, jaw tightening. They're cutting oversight to look faster on paper, I said, which means they're about to break 3 clauses in the agreement. That's leverage. We worked 12 hours a day for 10 straight days. Michelle rebuilt the model with our approach. Steady, compliance-proof, sustainable. Diana crafted the communication strategy and flagged key client metrics. Lewis mapped deliverables and set a timeline that mirrored, but improved, Stratwell's existing plan. Meanwhile, I prepared the story. Not a pitch, not a presentation, a truth. We weren't offering something new. We were offering what they'd been promised, by people who still believed in delivering it. By day 10, the boards were covered. The plan was locked. The deck airtight. No official title. No big-name firm backing us. But a plan built for impact, not appearances. In that stripped-down office, above the company that tried to erase me, we weren't afraid anymore. We were ready. I picked 11 a.m. on a Thursday, the same time Stratwell scheduled their quarterly strategic review on the 6th floor. I didn't pick that hour by accident. I knew the building's rhythm, how the elevator slowed between 10 and 11. The smell of catered lunch seeped up the stairwells. The hush that always settled before big meetings. But our meeting wasn't big. It wasn't loud. No branded folders or scripted talking points. Just 4 chairs, 1 screen, and a plan that actually worked. When the elevator doors opened on the 7th floor, the delegation from our $15 billion client stepped into a space that looked nothing like a corporate office. No receptionist, no glass logos, just us, Michelle, Diana, Lewis, and me. Standing in a room filled with dry erase boards, charts, and quiet confidence. "Where's your team?" one of them asked, scanning the room. "You're looking at it," I replied. They blinked, then smiled. We didn't waste a moment. Michelle led off, walking them through the model with clarity and precision, answering every question with data, not drama. Lewis followed with execution timelines, showing how our version reduced rollout risk by 30% without cutting oversight. Diana closed with communication strategy and impact metrics tailored to each market. And me? I watched. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I didn't need to say everything anymore. I'd built something that could speak for itself. When it was my turn, I stood, clicked to the final slide, and said, "This isn't about saving face. This is about saving what you started. The plan you approved deserves to be executed the way it was promised, by people who understood it from the beginning and still believe in it. No fireworks, no applause, just a long pause, a few exchanged glances, then quiet nods. The meeting ended at 12:20 p.m. No one lingered. No one needed to. We thanked them, walked them to the elevator, and watched the doors close. When I turned back, Lewis let out a slow breath. I think that was the first time I've ever seen them listen without interruption. They weren't listening to pitch decks, I said. They were listening to logic. It's been missing downstairs. Michelle half smiled. Diana packed up the folders. Then, at 1:07 p.m., I got the message. Subject: Interim Review Adjustment. Effective immediately. Stratwell Global's current engagement would be paused for strategic reevaluation. Further collaboration would depend on leadership reassessment. I didn't jump up. I didn't cheer. I just leaned back in my chair, eyes tracing the ceiling tiles. They hadn't chosen us. Not yet. But they'd chosen to stop choosing themselves. And that was louder than any yes. Downstairs, the walls were probably trembling with confusion. Whispers. Blame. Meetings about meetings they weren't invited to. But here, 2 floors above, it was quiet. No gloating, no revenge speeches, just the sound of alignment returning. The sound of something real beginning again. The deal closed on a rainy Monday morning. No boardroom, no champagne, no announcement, just a signed document, routed through a proxy firm, tucked into a file labeled Structural Equity Adjustment, Silent Partner Acquisition. The building's majority stake now belonged to Everline Holdings, a quiet, conservative entity with no obvious ties. On paper, just another low-profile capital fund. But behind Everline was Northwood and Ash Consulting. And behind Northwood and Ash was me. I bought 62% of the building Stratwell Global leased its 3 floors from. And no one knew. I didn't want to own it out of ego. I didn't even want control. Really, I wanted freedom. 6 years ago, before Stratwell, I co-founded a boutique advisory firm with 2 grad school colleagues. We sold it quietly. I walked away with 15% equity, non-voting, passive. For years, it sat there, growing, untouched, unneeded. Until this year, when the valuation tripled. When the last dividend hit my account, I didn't buy a new car or a bigger apartment. I bought leverage. I bought silence. I bought the ground beneath their empire. I drafted the letter myself. Simple. Director. Legally airtight. No emotion. Just resolution. To Stratwell Global. Office Lease Division. Subject: Lease Termination Notice. Effective 60 days from the date of this notice, all leased space currently occupied by your organization within floors 3 through 6 will be revoked. Per Clause 4, A, Performance and Ethics Breach, of the Standard Lease Agreement, this action is non-negotiable. Sincerely, Everline Holdings, Property Oversight Team. I clicked send at 10:45 a.m. Then I turned off my screen and drew the blinds. The light was soft that day, overcast, cool, perfect for clarity. On the floor below, people were still running meetings, giving presentations, pretending the foundation hadn't just shifted beneath their feet, the same foundation they thought I'd fallen through. By 1:30 p.m., the emails started flying. Michelle forwarded me the first one. Subject: Urgent. Immediate building notice. Please advise. Then Diana added a screenshot from a contact in facilities. We're confirming the lease termination came from Everline Holdings, who now controls the majority stake. But it was Lewis who dropped the real bomb. An internal Stratwell thread had leaked. A badly timed reply all chain spiraled into chaos. Buried inside was one line that made my pulse skip. Not from nerves, but from something colder. Did we just get evicted? By her? I stared at those words a long time. Not with pride, not with smugness, just stillness. Yes, they did. And I didn't raise my voice. I didn't storm into offices or threaten legal action. I simply signed the right document. At the right time, from the right altitude. It didn't take fury to dismantle a legacy built on arrogance. It only took precision. By sunset, Stratwell had called an emergency meeting. I could imagine Graham pacing, sweating, trying to understand how someone he demoted had pulled the floor out from under him. Literally, I didn't need to attend that meeting. I had already left it. 2 floors above, hours ago. By 8:50 a.m., I was at my desk, sipping black coffee, listening to the hum from the floor below. Collapsing in real time. You couldn't hear it in decibels, but in tone. Abrupt stops in conversation. The hiss of whispered questions. Muffled curses behind slammed doors. Graham had tried to downplay the lease termination in a company-wide email, calling it a sudden but manageable transition. But everyone knew better. You can't fake stability when security is changing the locks. At 9:23 a.m., the security guard on lobby duty buzzed our office. There's a man downstairs yelling at the front desk. Name's Graham Lockhart. He says he needs building access reinstated. I kept my voice even. Tell him to contact Everline Holdings. We don't handle tenant grievances. There was a pause on the line, then a quiet chuckle. Yes, ma'am. I walked over to the window overlooking the lobby, 2 floors down. Graham was pacing, face flushed, phone pressed so hard to his ear it looked like he wanted to crush it. His other hand gestured wildly at the front desk, but no one moved. He wasn't in charge here anymore. Michelle walked over and stood beside me. She followed my gaze without asking. Do we say anything? No, I said. We've already said everything we needed to. Moments later, the elevator doors opened at the far end of the lobby. A well-dressed man and woman stepped out. Familiar faces from the client's executive team. One approached the reception desk, glanced briefly at Graham, then asked calmly, We're here for a 10 o'clock with Carla Reynolds. 7th floor. The receptionist didn't blink. Of course. Take elevator C. Graham turned, startled. You mean Stratwell Global? The man shook his head with a faint smile. No, not Stratwell. We're meeting Carla Reynolds. Graham's shoulders dropped as the elevator doors closed behind them. There was no scene, no shouting match. Just quiet acknowledgement. The room he once commanded was no longer his to enter or even interrupt. I returned to my desk, flipped open a new file, and got back to work. Minutes later, a soft knock tapped against the glass wall of the office. It was Claire, a junior associate from Stratwell Global. She looked nervous, too overdressed for a casual visit, too composed for a meltdown. I hope it's okay, she said, but I was wondering if you're hiring. She handed me a folded resume, already printed, already signed. I glanced at the header. Claire Matheson, Business Strategy Analyst, current employer, Stratwell Global. My lips curved into something not quite a smile, not pity, not revenge, just confirmation. Let's talk after lunch, I said. As she turned to leave, I looked around the office. Michelle, deep in her model projections. Lewis mapping rollout deadlines. Diana on a call with legal. No one was celebrating. No one needed to be. Because we weren't here to gloat. We were here to replace what had failed and bury it quietly. And from the look on Graham's face in the lobby below, he knew it too. The building was quieter than usual that morning. Not empty, just still, like something had settled, something long overdue. I stood by the tall glass window in my corner office, 2 floors above the place that used to define me. Below, the lobby bustled with movement, people coming in, people going out. Just not the people who once dismissed me. No tears today, no bitterness, only breath, steady and full. Behind me, the team was already in the conference room. Diana straightened the contract packet on the table. Louis reviewed the rollout calendar one last time. Michelle adjusted the presentation slide, the Northwood and Ash logo glowing behind her. The client was 5 minutes early. They didn't come with an entourage or hesitation. They came with purpose and pens. We exchanged greetings, settled into our seats, and walked through the final points. I led the conversation. Calm, precise, assured. Not because I rehearsed it, but because I lived it. By 9:30 a.m., the strategy transfer was complete. By 9:31, the contracts were signed. No applause, just nods, handshakes, quiet affirmation, the kind of moment that doesn't ask to be celebrated, because it already is. After they left, I walked back to my desk. The light hit the logo on the wall just right. Northwood and Ash Consulting, etched in brushed steel. It felt solid, earned. I turned to the window once more, but this time I reached for the cord and gently drew the blinds closed. I didn't need to look down anymore. That chapter was over. Back at my screen, a new email sat in my inbox. Subject: Can we talk? From Graham Lockhart. I hovered over it for a moment, not out of anger, but out of clarity. Then I clicked archive. No response needed. I rose, walked into the conference room where my team was already laughing about something unrelated, and sat at the head of the table. Diana handed me a pen. You should keep this one. She smiled. I did, because this pen, unlike the last, signed something that wouldn't be taken away. We didn't build this company out of revenge. We built it because truth deserves a home, because silence doesn't mean surrender. It means patience. And when the time is right, it becomes the loudest force in the room. If you've followed my story this far, you know what it feels like to be overlooked, underestimated, or pushed aside. But here's the truth I want you to hold on to. No setback is permanent. Sometimes the hardest moments become the foundation for the greatest comebacks. I didn't shout, I didn't storm out. I quietly built my way back, one careful step at a time, and you can do the same. If you've ever been in my shoes, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below with your story, your struggles, or even your triumphs. Your voice matters. It might just inspire someone else who needs to keep going. Remember, real strength isn't loud. It's steady, patient, and persistent. When life knocks you down, don't rush to fight back with noise or anger. Instead, take a moment, breathe, plan, and then act with intention. Your progress is your power. Support me by liking this video, subscribing to the channel, and sharing this story with anyone who needs a reminder that patience and resilience lead to victory. Together, we can create a community where quiet strength is celebrated and every voice is heard. Keep building your legacy. Your time to shine is coming.